Alrighty, well, today we are here with Mr. Dale England. He is a candidate for Chelan County Commissioner. How's it going, Mr. England? It's great to have you here today.
It's going well. We're in the middle of apple harvest and things are busy, but yeah, it's a beautiful day out and it has been, and so can't complain.
Totally, totally. Well, glad you could make time for this and your busy schedule, of course. Um, so yeah, we're just hoping to have a nice conversation with you to get to know about your platform and your background and of course your personality. So hopefully it's less like an interview and more like more of a casual conversation. I do have some questions to kind of guide it though. So we can probably just get started with one of those.
Sure, I'm game.
Sounds good. So first of all, I guess I'm just curious how you ended up calling Chelan County home. Have you always lived here? Did you move into the area recent, anytime? Kind of what's your story in that sense?
Well, I was raised on the farm my mother was born on. So I'm a fourth generation apple farmer. My brother still runs the family farm. I purchased some other orchards, and I've been farming my orchard for over 40 years. I currently manage other orchards that we utilize H-2A visa guest workers and manage the overall operation of those orchards, including the labor, the budget, the timing of the different activities. I grew up in Manson. I was my first elected office was student body president my senior year in high school, and I volunteered all my life. As a youth, we helped plant seedlings after wildfires. We helped develop the Singleton Park in Manson. And so, at a young age, I started volunteering and serving the community. I then went to work for the sheriff's office for 27 years, and I retired from there about 12 years ago. And in the meantime, I formed a soil fumigation business where farmers that are replanting their orchards could have their soil fumigated. My brother and I had that business. We sold it, and it's still serving farmers today. I then, after my retirement from the sheriff's office, I started a helicopter business, Lake Chelan Helicopters, where we offer charter services to flying different towns. Stehekin, we do wine tours, sightseeing tours, any number of things like that. I work with the tourist industry quite heavily with that helicopter business. I've been married for 41 years to the same woman. I've got 6 kids and 14 grandkids. What else did you want to know?
That's fantastic. No, I mean, congrats on continuing your your family's I guess legacy here in Chelan County. Fantastic to hear about all your ventures. And branching off of that, you have a ton of experience in very diverse array of activities, obviously. How do you feel that kind of contributes to you being an electable person in terms of county commissioner?
Well, the county commissioner is responsible for a lot of the policy that affects all aspects of Chelan County. The fact that I have a strong agriculture and farming background is very important. Chelan County has been a farming county ever since it was initiated. And I bring the importance of farming to the board. We have always had a farmer on the board up till now. And so it's important that the commissioners understand how important the regulations as zoning, building codes, all these different regulations and county ordinances the commissioners may impose, they have to be very cognizant of how it is going to affect the industries. And farming is already very difficult. And my belief is the county should not do more harm than good when they make new regulations. With the helicopter business and my dealing with tourists on a regular basis, I have a strong background and understanding of what their needs and desires are. And I get 5-star ratings from my helicopter business because I cater to what sells with the customer. I understand the customer and I provide a service in a way that they are happy with it. And then, in my living here, we have built 2 homes and remodeled another one. So I have dealt with a lot of the building codes, the permitting process. We did some land use changes. And so I also have some experience in the construction end of it and the building permit process, which those 3 industries, the agriculture, tourism, and construction, bring a lot of money into Chelan County. Anytime we make a rule that affects one of these industries, we need to be cognizant that it doesn't do something negative to another one of our industries. And so I think my well-rounded background gives me the overview to realize what damage we might do by not making clear and concise judgments on specific issues.
Right. So I guess I'm curious. I don't know a ton about agriculture myself. Can you maybe give me an example or two of some policies or regulations that might, I guess, both positively in one example and negatively affect farmers or orchardists?
Well, Chelan County currently has right to farm regulations that allow the farmers to work their orchards 24 hours a day. Things like wind machines running at all hours of the night. Sprayers, when you may need to get a spray on, you may be working, sometime other than 8 to 5. And so those noise type regulations, if those were removed, would have a big impact on our farms. And so it's important to understand why those regulations are in place and what they do. Some of our building codes, there is a setback from the property line where a neighbor can build a home or a building next to the agriculture land. That helps set a buffer so that the dust and different issues at the orchard don't run a conflict with the health and safety of the people in the home. So those are a couple of examples.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, stuff that I didn't necessarily know about, and I feel probably the majority of voters don't necessarily know a ton about, which I think is something that makes the commissioner race really interesting, right? I think it's a position that a ton of people don't know a lot about. And I think something else that they don't know a lot about is how maybe the Board of Commissioners plays into ensuring, or potentially doesn't play into, or kind of the role of the Board of Commissioners in ensuring that we get out of this COVID pandemic, this COVID situation, in a way where everyone possible can be providing some sort of relief and support to obviously affected citizens or affected residents, excuse me, of Chelan County. So I guess in your eyes, what's the role of the Board of Commissioners in ensuring that there is some sort of recovery?
Well, first off, the current board has done a great job in being frugal with the funding that they have received. They have about $11 million in reserve. And so, that puts us in a great position. If we came into this with, very little reserve, we would be struggling a lot more. I'm not a fan of dumping a lot of that reserve into our first year. We don't know how long this is going to go. And I think it's reasonable for the commissioners in the back of their minds to know there is some money to help balance the budget. But that's the last resort. I don't think they should rely on that up front. Say, let's take $3 million and throw it in this year's budget and then decide the budget. I think taking money out of the reserve fund is your last ditch effort to balance the budget, not your primary source. So the county isn't really in a position to dole out money for individuals and things like that. The federal and state dollars are pushed down, and they're the ones that come up with the different stimulus programs and the loan programs to help small businesses and those type of things. That's really outside of the county's ability. They just don't have the funds to do that. So right. In my business, in all of my businesses, my farming, my fumigation, my helicopter business, I use a zero balance budget each year. And I sit down and I start with no money in the budget. And then I start building my expenses with what is required. Chelan County's primary purpose is the protection of life and property of the citizens. Now that spreads out a lot of ways. It's not just the sheriff's office. It's, public works, keeping the roads safe, the building codes, the public or the natural resources, the water runoff, it encompasses all these things. And so rather than starting with last year's budget and saying, where do we cut? I like to start at the bottom and justify each expense for our current year. Last year, maybe we spent an extra $5,000 on computers that we aren't going to need to spend this year. So that money would not be put in the zero-based budget. And so you would write off, save that $5,000. Now, maybe this year you needed to buy desks or whatever it was. And so, you put that money back in the budget. The current commissioners asked each department head to bring them a budget that was 10% below last year's budget. And, that's a good start as framework. But I think I would encourage doing it from the ground up rather than starting at the top and cutting back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so instead of right. Okay.
And
so go ahead.
A big portion of the budget is salaries.
Right.
And so the current commission, and it would be my intent also, is to not have to lay anybody off. I would rather forego projects than release our employees, because we have put a lot of money into it. There are a lot of good employees for the county, and it would be pretty silly to release employees that we have put good money into and then have to backfill their work with the other employees in that scenario.
Right, right. Okay. So I guess putting this in perspective, you mentioned, the strategy of building the budget from the ground up, and taking all efforts to not lay anyone off, and doing all those things. I don't know how familiar you are with the budgets or projects and stuff like that, but I guess I'm curious. Realistically, do you think there's a good chance that the commission will be going, kind of taking some of those reserve funds that they have, in balancing the budget this year? Realistically, even with in all stringent efforts.
The current estimate for sales tax revenue coming into the county is down a little bit under what they expected. And so with the holiday season coming up, if that's a boost in the sales tax revenue, that may bring it back up to their expectations.
Right.
The county is fortunate that they don't rely just on sales tax and those type of taxes for revenue. The property taxes is what the county gets most of their funding from. And those property taxes will remain consistent. And so the majority of the budget is firm with the income from the property taxes. The share of the budget that comes from sales tax is affordable if we bring it up a little bit during the holiday season, and if we do make about 10% cuts in the county's budget, then it looks like we would not need to take any money out of reserves if those two things came together. Now, if the county budget does go a little higher, then some funds may need to be removed. If the sales tax don't make that bounce for the holiday season, then there may need to be some money coming out of reserves. But as I said before, that is our last ditch effort and not our first reach.
Right, right. So you mentioned, a budget cut, or a cut of about 10%, right? Isn't that what you said?
That's what the commissioners asked.
Right, right. Okay. So in your eyes, being someone who's running for this position, and I'm sure who knows a lot about this position, where does that come out of? Where does that money come out of on the budget? Is it projects like you mentioned before? And if so, what projects? Is it just those little expenses that you were talking about before that kind of build up and accrue? What is it?
The bigger projects that the county gets involved in are usually with some state funded funds, federal funds, grants, that sort of thing. I don't know of any projects, the bigger projects they have, like the Goodwin Street Bridge in Kashmir, that they would be doing that's on the horizon. Now, there's a lot of different projects Public Works has laid out, but those are ones that can be adjusted quite easily depending on the funds. And that's why they have been laid out priority wise. And just like in our home, if I want to get a new TV or a new couch or whatever, those priorities for me are laid out. They may not be the same as for me as for my wife, but that's where we balance those priorities. And then if we do either save enough money over the course of time, or we get a windfall from, maybe selling a car or some overtime or any number of things, then we could go ahead and make those purchases earlier. That's kind of the way the projects work. Now, those budget cuts can come from the department was looking at, buying new computers, new printers, and maybe those are put off for another year. When I look at my own budget, there are a lot of things that fall into it that I could probably do without. That'd be nice to have, but can I wait to get them until I can better afford it? Then I better wait. It's that same type of thing.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because 10% is not an insignificant amount, right? That's a pretty big amount. So, and just to be clear though, you do think that would be within some of those smaller purchases that just can be pushed back to a later date?
Most of them, yes.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, from someone who doesn't exactly know a ton about all this, very interesting. Okay. So circling back to property rights and kind of streamlining that process, as we were talking about earlier, I noticed that I was looking through your campaign website as well, and I noticed that was a big issue that you mentioned on your platform. What are some tangible things that you would do as a commissioner to, I think you actually use the exact words, help streamline the process and make it easier and affordable for property owners to construct new property or obtain permits and stuff like that?
Well, when we built our house 2 years ago, my builder was starting a house in Douglas County about the same size as ours. He had the permit in Douglas County in about 2 weeks. It took about 6 weeks to get our permits. There are a lot of little things that need to be done to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. And some counties have found efficient ways to do that speed it up for the consumer. And I think there's some ways Chelan County can do that by taking the knowledge from these other counties to streamline what they can, but still follow the regulations in order to build the homes.
Right. So, I mean, would you mind giving a couple examples of some of the streamlines, some of the things that might streamline it?
One of the things is we had to do a geo study to make sure our home wasn't in a floodplain. We live on the edge of a very rocky, gravelly hillside that when I contracted the geologist, he didn't even come up to look. He just looked at the profile of the soil and the location of the house and signed it off. And, those are the types of things that tend to take longer. And we went down several times because a form wasn't signed by someone else that, it needed to get signed off by. And so rather than having a checklist like Douglas County has of, you want to build a house, this is your checklist. You want to build an apartment building, this is your checklist. And so you can, going into it, what is expected. And, the Mission Ridge is currently going through a process where they want to expand some runs and put some buildings and things. And they're frustrated because they went into the process with the idea they had certain regulations and requirements. And as they went through the process, those requirements changed. And so now they're kind of stuck and they don't know where to go. And I think if there was a checklist to sign off each one of these issues and they fulfill that checklist, then they should be able to move on.
Right, right. Seems intuitive to me. Sounds good. Very interesting, very interesting. So yeah, we're almost out of time, but I have a couple questions just to wrap all this stuff up. First one, a little more broad and broadly political, I guess, is kind of the issue of political polarization. I've talked to a couple of other commission candidates from other counties, as well as Chelan County, and people often comment on, they say things like, why is the commission position partisan position, and they say that kind of running as kind of on party lines for the county commission kind of has resulted for some of these people in some political polarization, or them experiencing some sort of political polarization, or has resulted in them running as an independent or something like that to try to distance them from the politics. I guess I'm curious, first of all, if you've seen that political polarization at all in your candidacy so far, and what your comment is maybe on the commissioner position being a partisan position.
Well, it was originally established as a partisan position because of the platforms of the parties.
Right.
And because of that, it has remained a partisan position. Some people say, well, it shouldn't be. Well, why are any of them partisan if this shouldn't be? Because, the parties have pretty much established platforms on what they want to accomplish. And I think it's fair for the people voting to have an idea of what the general expectations are of that candidate. And that's why they would, select one party or the other. Now, so I don't think we're going to change the partisanship of the position, but I think that's some of the background on why it is.
Totally.
Judgeships are nonpartisan because they should be impartial and they need to look at both sides equally. And so to make a judgeship partisan, there's a lot of good arguments not to. But
right.
Commissioner, if you're going to have any of the positions partisan, the same argument holds true for commissioner as it does for senator, president, whatever.
Totally.
So as far as the division between the parties, was that part of your question?
Right. Yeah, it was kind of a compound question. I apologize.
In the last few years, it has really blown up.
Totally.
And I have a broad spectrum of friends. And I think to be a well-rounded individual, you need to get outside of your box. I have, friends that are very religious, that are not religious, that are all different religions. And I think it's important not to just suck into your own religion and not look out and have friends and acquaintances in other religions. Same with politics. I have relatives that are the other side of the aisle than I am, very strongly, but we still communicate, we talk, we enjoy each other's company. And I think it's very sad that the media and different leaders have pushed us to one extreme or the other, and nobody can be in the middle. And I believe that we are much more alike than we are different. And I also believe that when we have conversations, as soon as somebody labels the other person, the conversation is over. And so we need to see each other as individuals. We need to be able to work together and, you know, help each other. I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago, and they saw someone broke down on the side of the road, and because they had a bumper sticker on their car, they did not stop to help them. And I just think that's a shame. It's just, you know, I certainly would not be proud of doing that. And, you know, whether it's a political sticker or what have you, you know, if I don't agree with what's on, you know, that sticker, and that makes me not want to help them, then I would be embarrassed. And, you know, when I worked for the sheriff's office, we never asked, you know, who are you? What is your political background? What's your religious background? Where are you from? You know, all these things. We responded and we did the best we could for each individual. And I think that's, you know, the county commissioner represents the whole county, not just Republicans, not just Democrats. And so I think it's very important that they act that way in their private life too.
I think that's very insightful, sir. Absolutely. Okay, well, that's just about all the time we have today. I don't want to take too much of your day.
All righty.
Yeah, but I want to thank you again for taking the time to come speak with us. And yeah, I really appreciated the conversation.
Yeah, you know, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk. You know, I appreciate your service in getting the word out, especially since we can't get together individually in person to do it. So thank you for your project.
Of course, happy to help spread the word. All right, have a good one.